Are you just starting your choreography journey and you want to learn what to do correctly by learning from these mistakes? Or are you in the thick of your choreography projects and you want to see if you've been doing any of these to make some changes? In this video, you're going to learn about the mistakes you might be making and how to pivot away from them to make pieces smarter, not harder. You're going to learn 10 mistakes that I've seen in the industry, in Instagram, in Facebook, in YouTube, in Vimeo, in dance companies, and some of my personal mistakes to help you in your choreography journey learn from them and start making smarter choreography choices and essentially make pieces that you love. Make sure you stick around until the end because I'm going to give you 2 extra bonus tips to help with your choreography. Before we get started, I want to learn a little bit more about you. I want to get to know you. So let me know below, are you thinking about starting your first piece? Have you done a couple here and there, or have you been doing this for years? Let me know below. I want to chat with you. And lastly, make sure you give this video a big thumbs up because it lets me know that you like these videos and I should keep making more of them. So let's go ahead and get started. Mistake number 1 is not being intentional. What's your piece about? What's the message? So what? Like, it has to have something underlying. 9 out of 10, if you're making a piece that you don't feel passionate about, if you don't have a message you want to bring across the stage, then you're gonna feel burnt out. You're not gonna want to finish it, and if you do finish it, you're not gonna like it. So be intentional with what you're making. That goes with all the details in the process as well. Being very intentional with costuming, lighting, character development, the choreography especially. That's not to say that I haven't started a piece and I didn't have any direction or I didn't know what it was about. But once I created that movement material and started to have more rehearsals, I started to see a pattern happening, a message evolving, and it turned into something after I decided what it was about, what was the so what of it. And I ran with that, and then I felt more energized about the piece. I had more ideas about the piece. But if you start out and you don't have an idea, that's okay. Just try and start focusing and start paying attention to what you're making in the process. See if it evokes any emotion. See if there's a character that's coming out of it. Do you see a place? Do you see a time period? Do you see a color? You know, like, pay attention, be intentional about what you're making. Don't make a piece just to make a piece. Tip on being intentional is take a step back. If you don't know what it's about, record it or watch it in rehearsal if it's not you, and take a step back and see what you notice. Say you have a trio of dancers and they stay in one spot. What does that tell you? Say you have a lot of traveling back and forth. To me, that could look like people in a city walking down the sidewalk. So that's a location, and then it can turn into something else. Say you take a step back and you notice, hey, this one character stays on the ground a lot. I mean, at this point, they don't have a character, they don't have any sort of emotion, but like, throw something at them. Say now you have to do this material on the ground, very rigid, and like you're moving through molasses. That can turn into pain and angst and sadness. Then you have a character. Then what is it about? Dive deeper, take a step back, and look and note. Going off of that, number 2 mistake is not planning. So I was subject to this in high school and college. I didn't plan. I didn't write anything down until I had a choreography class and we were required to have a notebook, and that was my saving grace because I have a lot of ideas in my crazy brain and I have to write them down or I'll forget them. So these ideas may not be good, but I write them down anyways. In a rehearsal, you need to plan what to come in with. I didn't do that. All I did was create new material to come into the next rehearsal with. I didn't think about what we had made and what we had done in the last rehearsal. I didn't write it down. I didn't say, hey, those 3 people are just standing there. Do I want them to stand there? I would write down, with those 3 people, maybe the next rehearsal, I would write down, try this traveling instead. You have to plan and come with ideas. Stick around to the end so I can show you how to set up your choreography journal for a rehearsal process. Planning has a lot to do with the tiny little details that all intertwine together. So take for example my senior piece, which I talked about in my choreo chats on my Instagram. It's the whole process. Even before I started, I was planning every little detail. So I knew I wanted 12 dancers because I had never done a big piece with a lot of bodies before. So I knew that I love character work, so I knew I wanted each one to be a different character. There was a twin set, but each one was a different character, and I worked with a costume designer. So before we even started, we were talking about costume design, and I knew I wanted it to be a burlesque kind of jazz scene. He came in with designs based on astrological signs. So we had 12 different ones, and they were each a different character with a different costume, and we had different emotions with that character and a different way of moving. Rigid versus relaxed and bored, for example, or very peppy, you know? So I planned every detail of the characters, so when we went into rehearsal to make movement, we would make movement based on that. Take this material I already gave you and perform it really exaggerated. Another thing that you need to plan is music. Another thing you need to plan is costumes. Another thing you need to plan is spacing on the stage. Write it all down. Map it out. Do as many sketches as you can, but in between every rehearsal, write it down. Whenever you have an idea, write it down. It'll help. It'll bring the whole piece together, and the audience then will think it's a world, will think it makes sense in their head, and it's not just a bunch of random parts. Mistake number 3, not finding inspiration. This is an overlooked step, but I think it is important if you're stuck and you don't have a direction for your piece. A couple places that you can look are Instagram, YouTube, and Pinterest. On Instagram, you can look up or find a dancer or find a piece you like and find one thing of inspiration you like from that. Say it's the costumes. Say it's one move. Okay, here's an example. I saw a piece that had 6 dancers and 3 of them were in this like lean, and then 1 popped up. I can use that as inspiration. I'm not going to take anybody's choreography. I can use that as a jumping off point. Yes, I can make it my own. You're not taking their choreography, you're taking the idea of jumping off a chair as your starting point. See the difference between taking the actual choreography and taking the idea and changing it. Inspiration on Pinterest, I find, is very art-based, visual art-based, and color-based. So this can do with costumes and set and character. So you can find someone in a laundromat and that's your character. You know, you can build it around them being bored in a laundromat and that's your jumping off point. Another thing about inspiration, another tip, is inspiration is everywhere. You need to be consuming. I know we consume aimlessly and robotically, but you need to be consuming strategically. Watch old movies, watch silent films, watch things that aren't in your genre that you like to watch. Search things on YouTube that you don't normally search, that you find interesting, like windmills or hot air balloons. I don't know. You need to be consuming in all aspects. Like, all you have to do is sit back and watch. Have your journal, plan, write things down. Anything that you find interesting. I saw another woman walking back and forth outside of a church, and the way she moved and looked behind herself, he knew that she was grieving, and he eventually went up to her and like talked to her. But that turned into a piece that I was in sophomore, junior year, was about grieving and loss. So watch people if you don't have access to people like we are right now in COVID times, you have an abundance of research in front of you at your fingertips. So expand, consume, notice, write it down for inspiration. Okay, this fourth mistake was not the biggest, it's the second biggest mistake that I made in my college journey, was not taking a step back or recording. Record, record, record. It saves lives. It saves gray hairs. You can take a step back in rehearsal if you have time, but generally I like to use as much time as possible so I can step back and watch if we have to do a run through. I don't necessarily remember it though, so I have to record it. I learned this in my friend's rehearsal where she would record every single phrase work that we did, and then she'd come back with changes to each. So it's good if you don't have time to review it right away, or you have to review it right before rehearsal to bring notes in, you know? So record it and notice. You're not saying, oh, this looks stupid. Change your focus to be like, oh, that one person is walking across the stage by themselves. That's it. You're not jumping to conclusions and saying like, that one person looks very lonely. That's what it could turn into, but right now just record and notice. Say, hey, those three that are upstage and staying in place, do I want to keep that? Do I want to try something new? When in doubt, try something new, and then you can always go back to it. Because I didn't have time to write everything down super fast while watching it one time in rehearsal. I had to go back and I had to watch it again. Maybe several times. Point is record. Okay, here's the biggest mistake I've made. The fifth mistake. Trying to fit your idea into a box and keeping it there. I don't know what I just said. I had this great idea that I was going to take the voicemails that my family had sent me and I was going to compile them, and that was going to be part of my sound score, and then I'm going to cast people as my family, and it's going to be about my long distance relationship with my family and how that's putting a stressor on me. And that's the idea. And let's force all of the movement and all of the costumes and all of the stage direction into that idea. Boy, no. Tried to keep that idea in its box. It's a pretty little wrapped up box. This is what it is. This is what I'm serving you. But, you know, if I just noticed like what I liked and what I didn't like, scrap what I didn't like and take what I like and expand it, it would have turned into something completely different, and it didn't have to be about that. So what I'm saying is, don't force your idea. The sixth mistake I see in a lot of competitions, a lot of companies, and a lot of videos is not finding the right music, or for that matter, spending the time to find the right music. Things I go for on Spotify are folk music, guitar, solos or pieces, Motown, jazz, soul, funk. I stay away from rap and pop and heavy lyric music, and also go towards classical music and music from around the world as well. Careful with classical music, because classical music can tend to be boring, but it depends on the piece. That's my opinion. But the mistake is not spending the time. So if you don't have a huge chunk of time, whenever you're driving, whenever you're taking a shower, whenever you're cooking dinner, whenever you're doing mundane tasks that you like to play music during, find something else. Put on a radio that you don't normally put on. That's a good way to find something that could spark an idea for a piece. Please, 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 don't use boring elevator music. It's not helping anyone, especially for a modern piece. And for a competition piece, stop using pop songs. Oh my God, there is so much more out there and more interesting stuff. And here's a tip. If you use something that's not popular, the judges are gonna be like, I haven't heard this yet. Instead of the driver's license shenanigans that they're gonna hear 1,000 times. With competition pieces, Don't throw outfits together. This goes back to the planning aspect. Plan your characters. What would they wear? If it's an angsty teenager, they're not gonna wear khakis and a button down. Like, spend the time on Pinterest to look up outfit inspiration. You can be so creative with this, and if you nail down these tiny details and make slight variations to your costumes, people are gonna be like, I know that character from the second they see them, before they even see the dancing. It's the slight changes that fit those characters, you know? So, Pinterest, 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 Pinterest. Add something else, like based on the character or what they just came from. If it's a couple and there was a fighting scene, is there a wine stain on them? Or coffee stain? Or were they outside and it's romantic and they come in and they're soaking wet, so you like gel their hair, or maybe it's actually wet. Like, find the tiny details of the character where they just came from for the scene. This is a mistake in new choreographers, that I was in a choreography class a couple years ago, and the choreographers around me weren't letting themselves be weird. They were making these beautiful shapes because they came from competition, which is fine. Beautiful shapes have their time and place, but they weren't expressing themselves authentically. They were just doing the moves, if that makes sense. So you can take a beautiful move like an allongé and you can break it. You can turn it to the ground. You can have it traveling. You can have it spazzing. Be weird. It's your time to explore. Take chances and make mistakes in a good way, not in this whole video aspect. But the mistake of not being weird and not taking a chance is a much bigger mistake than trying something weird and it doesn't work out. Experiment with the moves and you might find something unique and interesting that way. Another mistake I see in a lot of contemporary company pieces on YouTube is they forget about the camera. They use it in an audience way, if that makes sense. It's like a proscenium stage. It's kind of objective. It's kind of far away. They're not using it in the scene. And the choreography is flat, and they're forgetting that you can go forward and back. You can be in relation to the camera to tell a story. You can do over the shoulder shots. You can do a panning shot. Don't forget about the camera. You can even start with that if you don't have an idea. You can take your camera and say, we're gonna go up, down, around, and this way. And then you can create the choreography based on up, down, that way, and this way. You know what I mean? Say it's an outgoing or storytelling character, like I'm telling you, versus like an introspective, maybe sad, internal character. That way, like the camera is peeking in on this person. That's a whole different way to use the camera. So the camera is part of the storytelling. Don't forget about that. Biggest mistake. I've already said that. So this is the biggest mistake. Not falling in love with the process. You chose to do this. You chose to make these pieces. You have something to say. Fall in love with every single decision and step you take along the process. If you mess up, fall in love with the mess ups and learn from them. That's the point of all of this. If you say, I love coming to rehearsal, I love thinking of these new ideas, I'm obsessed with my piece, I keep thinking of new ideas, I keep finding new music, I keep looking it up, even if it's not the right stuff, I keep going and falling in love with the process, you're ultimately going to be satisfied with what you make. That's the biggest lesson I can give you, is fall in love with the process. That was a lot of stuff. Here are 2 extra tips that you can use for your notebook. Go to a dollar store and grab a notebook if you're like me and you like to write things physically down, or start a new list in your phone. or on your laptop. Anything will work, but have one spot that you go back to over and over again. I know for me, my phone doesn't work all that well because if I don't have a piece of paper, I'll write it in my phone, but then I end up having 30 notes in my phone and it doesn't keep me very organized and I tend to lose the ideas. So having a notebook, especially if you're in a rehearsal process, so you have everything in one spot, is very helpful. These are some things that you should have in your journal. Changes. So anything you want to change from last time. Yeah, so this could be like 3 dancers like we talked about, moving instead. I can bring an 8 count or 8 gestures for the chorus, and we're gonna try it doing moving in space. We can try it 3 forward, 2 moving, etc. 8 gestures or an 8 count, and then ways to play around with it in rehearsal. And then notice that there's one person alone on stage. This is when you watch it, if you have time. So that could be something that you change for next time, or you bring new ideas for it. Changes, what you're bringing, or what they're bringing, and what you notice. Here's another idea, another tip for you. If you just have a section in your notebook that's ideas, you can have little boxes. You can add it to the inspiration section, or you can watch and observe people, and that's observations. It could be your roommates, it could be your family members, it could be your dog, it could be something you watch on TV. You can add your dreams, because I know we have some weird dreams as creatives. And then you can add ideas for your rehearsal, and you can add random ideas. So if it doesn't fit in these categories, or you just want to dump all into random, that works too. But having an ideas page that you always go back to and you always dump into is a great idea. That's all for today's video. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked all of these mistakes and you think that it'll be helpful for you moving on in your choreography process. Let me know below what stage of your choreography process you're in so we can chat. You can find me over on Instagram at Erin_Johnson_802. You will see me on the next one. Have a good day. Bye.
To help your choreography immensely. To immensely help your choreography.
What about? Have a